Quick heads up, this story gets graphic and disturbing. Viewer discretion advised.
This represents that same nightmare. You know, the situation where the person they trusted the most, the one the children just adored, turned out to be, well, a genuine monster. I mean, this goes beyond a simple story of betrayal. This deals with a level of inhuman, totally, like unimaginable cruelty. Something a healthy person, frankly, can barely even comprehend. What the mother discovered in that bathroom, I mean, it just forces you to ask one single central question. What could they have possibly done to you? So definitely watch this video until the end, because, you see, that's where we'll try to figure out what pushed this apparently loving woman to take such a, well, desperate step. Hello, everyone. Look, we won't drag this out. Just write what city you're from. What time do you have right now? What about the weather? Plus your favorite scent, like, I don't know, coffee, rain, fresh baking. Oh, also subscribe since you're already watching. That way you support this channel.
Today's case, well, it brings us to the very heart of New York City. You know, the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I mean, just so you understand, this represents one of the most prestigious, most expensive parts of the city. We're talking about a 10-story apartment building on West 75th Street. Look, this building sits literally a block away from Central Park. It's like a place where people live who, you know, seemingly have achieved everything, living in like complete safety. The date on the calendar, October 25th, 2012. The story? Well, it begins with an absolutely mundane, almost cinematic scene. A woman named Charlotte, a neighbor, rides in the building's elevator. Along with her, 2 small children who also live there, plus their nanny. Charlotte, you know, as people do, decided to give a compliment. She turned to the little girl. "Do you know how beautiful you are?" The child, in response, gave her the widest, most sincere smile that she, according to Charlotte, had ever seen. Just said, "Thank you." I mean, that's the moment you see every day. Just a normal, polite conversation in an elevator. Literally nothing suggested trouble. So it seemed like with the nanny, with the children, everything was totally fine. Idyllic. But as we know, seemed. That remains the scariest word in these cases, right? Less than an hour went by. Less than 60 minutes after that sweet smile. Around 5:30 in the evening, Charlotte again found herself in that same elevator. So just then, the idyll shattered. She heard what she later described as a primal scream. You know, some kind of animal, visceral sound coming from somewhere inside the building. It represented pure horror, she said. It sounded unlike anything I had heard before. I mean, this happened in New York City, where people, you know, seemingly had heard it all. Exiting the elevator, Charlotte saw a woman standing on the mezzanine, you know, the intermediate floor, just screaming, like frantically. Other neighbors, of course, also heard this horror, so they started coming out of their expensive apartments, you know, to see what the hell was happening. All right, so let's rewind just a bit. Like, what exactly led to this scream? The children's mother, Marina Krim, well, that day she took her 3-year-old daughter Inez, who everyone affectionately called Nessie, to a swimming lesson. Her other children, 6-year-old Lucia, or Lulu, plus 2-year-old Leo, stayed home with the nanny, 50-year-old Jocelyn Ortega. Yep, the same nanny from the elevator. Marina arranged to meet the children later that day, but at the designated spot, well, neither she nor the children, of course, showed up. So right here begins that cold dread, you know, familiar to every parent. Marina started to get really worried. I mean, where were they? She sent text messages, but they remained unanswered. Where are you? Where Lulu? Just silence. So then Marina, already having a really bad feeling, headed home with Nessie, you know, to check if everything felt okay. Going up to the apartment, opening the door, she saw nothing. Just an eerie, oppressive silence. All the lights were off. I mean, this happened at a time when the kids should have been running around, making noise. She went downstairs to talk to the doorman. You know, these buildings always have a doorman. To ask if he saw them leaving. He said no. So now the panic really builds. She went upstairs again, back into the apartment to search for them. She saw her daughter's bag plus her son's stroller in their usual spots, which meant, right, they never left for that walk they were supposed to take. Holding her only surviving daughter Nessie by the hand. I mean, just imagine that moment. She started going from room to room. She reached the bathroom. Then she saw a thin crack of light coming from under the door.
The police, experienced New York City police, they soon arrived at this prestigious apartment building. But when they entered the lobby, they saw Marina Krim. She was screaming. She was crying, just holding on tightly to Nessie. A neighbor described her state as inconsolable, hysterical, frantic. But honestly, I don't think words exist in human language capable of adequately describing what she felt. The scene that awaited the rescuers upstairs, well, it surpassed even the worst nightmare. So while emergency workers continued to flock to the building, while neighbors tried to even comprehend what happened in their safe home, Marina's husband, Kevin, well, at that exact moment, he was returning home from a business trip. He worked as a senior vice president at CNBC Digital. I mean, his plane was literally just landing at John F. Kennedy International Airport. When he arrived, he was met by two officers in plain clothes, representing, I guess, a worse sign you can possibly imagine at an airport. He still didn't know what had happened. He listened to a voicemail Marina had left him, but all he heard, just screams. Only then was he told what happened. That his world, as he knew it, it just didn't exist anymore. 37-year-old Kevin Krim, plus his 36-year-old wife Marina, they had 3 children. They seemed like that perfect family from California, but they later moved from San Francisco to New York City, to build their life here. Marina, well, she had a great education. She worked as a kindergarten teacher after she got her bachelor's degree in fine arts, followed by a master's degree in education. But after becoming a mother, she left that profession, to spend more time with her kids, kind of the classic story. Later, for extra help, they hired a nanny, 50-year-old Jocelyn Ortega, who, this part matters, had lived with the family for 2 years already. She wasn't some new person. I mean, she felt like part of the family. Jocelyn, of course, was immediately arrested. Well, more precisely, they carried her out of the building on a stretcher. The goal remained getting her to stand trial.
Other news tonight, there is a growing memorial outside an Upper West Side apartment building where a nanny is accused of killing 2.
So when the news about, what exactly happened in that wealthy building, when it started to leak out, well, the city just froze. Many people were in a state of, not just shock. It felt like a state of absolute numbness, which, you can understand. Like, how this even possible? Here, in a place like this. Pretty soon, near the building, just on the sidewalk, a memorial began to form. Just spontaneously. Flowers, soft toys, all of it a silent testament to the fact that the collective mind, well, it just refused to accept this. Then Marina herself, plus little Nessie, police officers led them from the building, covering them with a white sheet. Just picture that scene, almost like ghosts. This was done, of course, not just because of protocol, but also to protect them from the pack of photographers who had already, flocked to the scent of a tragedy. Marina, who remained in a state of, profound shock, was also taken to the hospital. Frankly, she needed medical attention. But for everyone, from the police to the neighbors to, us, there was one single central question. What the hell happened in there? But most importantly, why?
They came to the Upper West Side today and stared, silently, hopelessly trying to make some sense of all the horror and pain here. But how in the world do you make sense out of this?
All right, so who is this woman? This killer, Jocelyn Ortega? So, as the children's nanny, Jocelyn, whom the kids, this part matters, affectionately called Josie. She wasn't considered just staff or a hired employee. She was considered a full-fledged member of the Krim family. She was born in Santiago de los Caballeros in the Dominican Republic, but later moved to the US, even got American citizenship. So she was actively building her life here. In New York City, in Manhattan, she lived with her sister, her niece, plus her own son. So here's the thing about how she even got connected to the Krims. It wasn't like an ad on Craigslist or in the paper. No, it all happened through seemingly the most reliable way. A trusted circle. Jocelyn's sister, basically, connected her to the family. This sister, she was also a nanny, plus her employer's child. Imagine the coincidence. Went to the same preschool as the Krim's oldest daughter, Lucia. The classic playground recommendation. The sister just approached Marina during a ballet class, kind of casually asked if she had a nanny. Marina told her no, actually they were looking. The Krims, remember, they were had recently moved to New York City. Plus, New York City with 3 small kids. I mean, that's quite a challenge, right? They were literally just considering hiring someone for full-time help. So, of course, they asked for references for Jocelyn. Plus, on paper, also from the sisters' words, everything looked, honestly, just great. The perfect candidate. But later on, after the tragedy, when journalists plus police started digging deeper, something very disturbing emerged. Apparently, it was reported that one of the relatives, possibly that same sister, gave Jocelyn a false, a totally fake recommendation. They claimed she was a nanny for a child who, wait for it, never existed. This represented the first not even red, a dark crimson spot on her perfect resume. You know, a spot that, sadly, no one noticed at the time. But back then, of course, the Crins, they didn't know about it. They trusted her completely. I mean, how much? Well, Marina ran a pretty popular blog, where she detailed everything happening in their family. The name was cute, Life with the Little Crims. Plus, this blog, essentially, was a digital diary of what the kids were up to. Also, just everything related to their family life. So from this blog, it became perfectly clear that Jocelyn, that same Josie, she wasn't just an employee. She felt like part of the family. Look, here's the concrete proof. In February 2012, so just 8 months before the events, just imagine, the entire Crim family went to the Dominican Republic for a 9-day vacation. But they didn't just take her with them, as staff. No, they partly stayed at Jocelyn's sister's place, in her home. We spent the last 9 days in the Dominican Republic. Marina wrote on the blog on February 18th. She details, half the time we spent with our nanny, at Josie's sister's home in Santiago, plus the rest of the time at the Balcones de Atlántico Hotel in Las Terrenas. She even describes the hotel as a place where the real housewives of the Dominican Republic plus their families spend their weekends. I mean, this wasn't some cheap vacation. It was a real, full-blown, expensive trip. But most importantly, her conclusion in that post, it felt wonderful. We met Josie's amazing family plus the Dominican Republic. A great country. Literally not a shadow of a doubt. No hint of tension. Amazing family. So this blog also shows another even more tragic side. Just what kind of parents Marina plus Kevin were. They were just good. I mean, they were extremely dedicated. Several blog posts literally scream about how much they adored their kids, how they savored every single moment. For example, September 30th, just a month before the tragedy, Marina posted a photo of their son Leo after his 2nd birthday. She wrote, "One of the best parts of my day, that's when I take both girls to school, plus have 3 precious hours alone with little Lido," his nickname. Then she adds, "Okay, I'm almost silly. I just adore this boy so much." I mean, these are just the words of a loving mother enjoying every minute with her son. Not even suspecting how much pain the very person she trusted with this, her greatest treasure, would eventually cause her.
Investigators are trying to figure out this morning what could have made a New York family's caretaker turn on the children she was paid to protect.
Keep going!
So, of course, they immediately stabilized her. They administered powerful sedatives, intubated her, connected her to a breathing apparatus, but naturally placed her under round-the-clock police supervision. She wasn't really a patient anymore. She was an arrestee. Then, 2 days later, Jocelyn emerged from the medically induced coma. Absolutely no chance of escape or, another attempt. Because of her injuries, she had to communicate with detectives. Just like in a bad movie. She'd barely mouth the words, using them to, read her lips, or she'd point to an alphabet board. So what did she write using this method? What were her first urgent words? Maybe, remorse? No, I had to do everything plus take care of the children. That was her first complaint. I only worked as a nanny, but she, Marina, wanted me to do everything. So I wanted to clean 5 hours weekly. I mean, wait a sec. They asked her to clean? But this became the reason? That's her explanation for what happened in that bathroom? Obviously, investigators needed to dig much, much deeper. They had to explore every corner of Jocelyn's life to see if there were, any clues at all. Just something that could explain why she did, what she did. So here's the first serious lead: money. Like it so often happens. It turned out that just a few months earlier, Jocelyn had moved her 17-year-old son from the Dominican Republic to New York City. You know, a very expensive thing to do. She reportedly wanted to put him not just in public school, but in like a costly private school. Her brother, who apparently was more financially secure, agreed to pay for the first year. But he made it clear that after that, she was on her own. She would be responsible for all future costs. Plus, in New York City, that means thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars. Investigators, they checked her past too. She divorced her son's father way back in 2001. But her ex-husband said there were no problems between them. You know, no big dramas. When sources told him what she had done, he was like completely shocked. He told journalists he had no idea what demons were raging inside her. And that's a phrase, I mean, we hear so often in these cases, right? Nobody ever knows anything, until it's too late. Even Jocelyn's niece called the incident, well, of course, shocking. She insisted she loved those kids. I don't know what could have made her do this. But look, here's that but that always shows up in these talks. She did add that her aunt seemed a little strange lately. Plus, acted kind of nervous, a little strange. Another neighbor who met the nanny literally just a few days before the tragedy described her as very quiet. The type who didn't interact with anyone, just stared straight ahead. That same like empty gaze. Jocelyn's neighbors in her own area, Hamilton Heights, they also noticed changes. They said she looked like she had lost a lot of weight. She looked unhappy, nervous, plus agitated. I mean, that's more than just a little strange. That sounds like a person on the verge of a breakdown. So the financial pressure, it becomes even clearer. It turned out she had recently moved back in with relatives in Hamilton Heights after losing her own apartment in the Bronx. Probably, due to non-payment. She was literally selling items, some cosmetics, jewelry, just to try to make any extra money. But this brings us back to her first complaint. Jocelyn directly told investigators she had serious money problems. So, as one source reported, she seemed enraged after the Krim family, the family that took her on vacation, asked her to perform extra housework, in exchange for more money. I mean, they most likely saw she needed cash, so they offered her a way to earn it. Her position, though, was different. She said something like, "I'm paid to watch the children, not to clean or do housework," a media source reported. Basically, she took it as a humiliation, while the Krims, I guess, probably saw it as a way to help her out. But here's the most terrifying detail of all. Just one day before the events, 24 hours, Faustio Cornell, a friend who knew Jocelyn since childhood, said she called, asked his wife to urgently take her to a psychologist. But the wife did. She was at the doctor's. She was asking for help just one day before she grabbed that implement. Let's go back to the hospital. As the anesthesia from her operation started to wear off, she reportedly remained in a state that doctors described as catatonic. I mean, she just lay there, like a living mannequin, eventually moving only her eyes, just nodding. So here's a very telling quote from a law enforcement source. The more she realized what she did, the less she wanted to talk. The awareness, I guess, started to set in. But it was just, way too late. Immediately after that, she was officially charged, right there in the hospital bed, still in restraint.
So as this story began to just explode, because it really did explode, hitting like the front pages of newspapers all over the world, people weren't just surprised. Honestly, they were stunned. They couldn't, reconcile two facts in their minds, how the crime could feel so, but at the same time be committed by someone they trusted so just implicitly, someone who ate at their table, someone who felt like part of the family. That shock, it felt literally palpable in the New York City air. The sadness, what we all feel for Kevin, Marina, plus their family, it truly felt immense. I mean, these weren't just words. Even Mark Hoffman, the CEO plus president of CNBC where Kevin worked, a guy used to the tough corporate world, he publicly stated, there simply are no words to convey the scope of this tragedy. When, top executives at that level speak so emotionally, it means the tragedy truly broke through all the defensive barriers. Of course, the whole family, Kevin's parents, Marina's parents, their siblings, living all the way out on the West Coast, they all immediately flew to New York City to offer, well, just some kind of support. I mean, what support can you even offer? Just being there. Kevin's father confirmed what everyone really already guessed. They didn't go back to that apartment. Not to the apartment, where the terrible scene occurred. I don't know if they ever will, he told reporters. I don't know if I could. But really, how can you return to a place that Kevin reportedly did everything he could to stay strong? Not for himself, but for his wife, for his surviving daughter, but I guess it only represented a mask. His father, the children's grandfather, shared a heartbreaking moment. He said, "Our son sent our daughters, his sisters, a message. I can't talk to mom plus dad right now because I'll just break." He held on, but he felt he was on the edge. "We're just grieving." That's all they could do. The worst nightmare you can possibly imagine. Those were the words from the kid's grandmother, Karen Grimm. "We have absolutely no idea what made her do this." Plus that. Right, that remained the main question. Nobody understood the motive. So now we move to the legal part. Jocelyn faced charges, with the full weight of the law. 2 counts of murder in the first degree, that's, the highest category, with aggravating factors. Plus 2 counts of murder in the second degree. Her response? Well, she pleaded not guilty. But she didn't say, "I didn't do it." No, she pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Prosecutors, of course, just, exploded at that position. This stemmed from just a banal, petty resentment she felt toward Marina, all over those, damned household chores. The prosecution side added that they had, 0 credible evidence pointing to any real mental illness or serious defects, except, of course, for the fact that she behaved like a monster. During her first court appearance, the lawyers started stalling. They claimed they needed more time to review, get this, 6,000 pages of her medical records. 6,000 pages. All of this just to determine if she was even competent to stand trial. If she understood what was happening. All this time, naturally, she was held without bail, but not in a regular jail, no, in the prison ward for psychiatric patients at Elmhurst Hospital Center. The memorial service for the children, well, it took place at Avery Fisher Hall in Manhattan. A huge, prestigious concert venue. After this just agonizing farewell, the couple released a statement. "We want to thank you for your extraordinary outpouring of love plus kindness. Lulu plus Leo were 2 of our 3 best friends, plus we miss them so much. Our daughter Nessie remains incredibly strong. Plus with your support, we will be strong for her." But they did something incredible. Instead of just, closing themselves off in their grief, we honor our children by creating the Lulu plus Leo Fund. This fund, well, it began supporting participatory arts plus science education for young children in schools, museums, plus other community settings. Why art specifically? Because, as they wrote, Lulu's art classes became some of her most joyous plus enriching moments. We like to help other children get access to similar wonderful experiences. I mean, they took their greatest sorrow, turned it into light for others. Then life, as wild as this sounds, began to push through the darkness. Exactly 1 year later, October 2013, like a ray of light for the couple, they had a baby boy, Felix. It felt incredible.
They wrote on Facebook, "The fall, a busy plus emotional time of year for us. We have the important anniversary of Leo's birthday plus Lulu's plus Leo's deaths." So in that same post, they announced, "We also have some wonderful news. Marina's pregnant with another boy due at the end of January. Nessie," they wrote, "felt excited about her new role as the queen bee of the family. Plus little Felix, who is turning 2, felt happy to give up his crib, to become roommates with Nessie in a new bunk bed. They were rebuilding their family just brick by brick. With each new baby, we feel a special plus close connection to Lulu plus Leo, who are, constantly present in the looks, gestures, plus voices of their siblings. Marina later gave birth to that baby boy. They named him Linus. The Krim family felt large once again. But while they were trying to live, the legal machine never stopped. Jocelyn Ortega. After all those evaluations, those 6,000 pages, she was ultimately found fit for trial. The court appointed its own psychiatric exam, which confirmed, yes, she absolutely possessed the ability to aid in her own defense. She understood what was happening. So Jocelyn Ortega finally appeared before Judge Gregory Caro. Even the judge, a man who'd seen it all, said during jury selection, if you don't feel emotion during this trial, maybe you need to check your pulse. That's a direct quote from the judge. It just shows how toxic, how heavy this case felt from the very beginning. But she was offered a deal. The prosecution offered her a plea agreement, 30 years to life, in exchange for her pleading guilty to 2 counts of murder. Jocelyn, well, she rejected that deal. She decided to go all the way. Plus, all the previous few years had been just pre-trial proceedings, focused, exclusively on her mental state. But her lawyers chose the most difficult path. You have to understand, in New York State, the requirements for a successful insanity defense, they're just incredibly high, sky high. This doesn't work like in the movies, where someone just says, I'm crazy, plus gets sent to a sanatorium. As a result, this defense, well, it rarely ever works. Her lawyers would have to prove not just, that she felt upset or depressed. They'd have to prove that, at the moment she committed the acts, Jocelyn had absolutely no awareness that what she was doing felt wrong, that she didn't understand the consequences of her actions. But the prosecution, they made it very clear. They didn't buy that story at all. They were going to prove this represented revenge, not psychosis.
I will ask that you determine whether or not my client had an ability to understand and perceive and confront her illness on October 25th, 12. I will ask you to determine whether she had the prerequisite mental state.
Objection as to the summation entirely.
Respectfully accept. The insanity defense to be proffered by Jocelyn Ortega is deeply rooted in the cultural and legal traditions of our democratic society. While on the one hand there is legitimate need to hold and punish criminal defendants who are accountable and responsible pursuant to our laws for their actions, there is also the law.
Well, I'm going to instruct you on the law. It's what I instruct you on. You must follow. Okay? Go ahead.
I will argue and the defense will show.
Objection as to I will argue.
I will prove and the defense will show that it is wrong, and a wrong has been committed here, an intentional wrong. If a person is capable of that intent, was she capable of forming an intent to kill on October 25th, 12? That is the question here. And I will ask you to determine at the end of this case whether or not these acts were driven by my client's acute psychotic state. Judge, this is what
Overruled. Go ahead.
whether or not these acts that are set out on People's Direct were driven by my client's acute psychotic state. Were they driven by her delusions, her hallucinations, her dissociation, and her severe depression? Or were they...
Okay, so the trial got underway. Then the assistant district attorney, Courtney Grove, she came out with her opening statement. But right away, she started painting a picture for the jury. But this picture, well, it didn't show sudden psychosis. It showed cold-blooded, deliberate calculation. She informed them that Jocelyn, not Yaslin, like some reports mistakenly said. That's important. She took 2 kitchen implements, not 1, grabbed in a fit of blind rage, but 2. Before she began this, here's the detail that it chills you. This wasn't an impulsive act. Grove just insisted on this point. She planned these acts, but carried them out at the exact time when, as she knew perfectly well, she wouldn't be interrupted. In that exact window, when Marina was at the swimming lesson with Nessie. So, of course, the prosecution immediately went after that psychologist visit. Remember? The one from the day before the events. They presented it not as proof of her insanity, but this is one of the 2 points that comes to mind in that exact window. The exact opposite as proof of her sanity. It turned out, right, this represented the only contact Jocelyn had with a mental health professional in the last 30 years of her life. According to the DA, she felt anxiety, yes, plus stress. She felt like a failure. But, who else feels like that? I mean, probably half of New York City. That's just not an excuse for what she did. So that same therapist she saw, Dr. Thomas Caffrey, he testified. Plus, this represented a powerful, just devastating blow to the defense's strategy. Dr. Caffrey confirmed under oath that, yes, she met with him to discuss several issues. Feelings of guilt, anxiety, plus depression, all that, true. But, the main butt of the whole trial, she didn't give the impression of someone or anyone else. But most importantly, he said there existed zero evidence, none, that she suffered from hallucinations or, delusions. She wasn't hearing voices, she wasn't seeing demons. She just seemed unhappy, plus angry. Then, one of the first people to testify for the prosecution, well, it was Marina Krim herself.
A defense attorney asked Krim about talking to police after the murders. Krim grew upset and yelled, "I don't remember what I said that day. I was grieving in a massive way." Krim testified a few weeks before the murders, she saw the nanny, quote, looking at me with this glare on her face that was just pure evil, a really weird, mean look.
We saw jurors in tears as they left the courtroom after hearing Marina Krim's heartbreaking testimony. The defendant, Jocelyn Ortega, remained emotionless throughout the entire hearing.
From emotional to angry, it was day 2 of testimony in the case of the Upper West Side nanny charged with today. Defiant mother Marina Krim was back on the stand. At times, she directly addressed her former nanny, Jocelyn Ortega, and called her evil. Eyewitness News reporter Rob Nelson has the story.
After finishing 2 days of gut-wrenching testimony, Marina Krim again lashed out at the accused killer of her 2 children today, shouting, "You're evil, you're evil, please get me out of here," as she left the courtroom in a fit of anger and grief.
What the jurors had to go through, it's just impossible to imagine. They sat there, right, listening to the dry, procedural descriptions of what happened to these kids, but then they were shown the photographs. But another juror, he just couldn't take it. He officially asked to be dismissed. He straight up told the judge he just couldn't. He couldn't be a fair, impartial member of the jury after what he saw. These are just regular people, just pulled from their lives to, witness something like this. So you know what Jocelyn herself was doing while the jurors were nearly passing out from these photos? She didn't look at them. Nope. She stared straight ahead, just that same empty gaze. Honestly, her behavior in the courtroom, that's a whole separate weird story, because there were moments when she laughed, actually laughed. For example, when a retired police officer was talking about some interactions he had with her after the events. What was he even saying that made her laugh? But then other times, she just sat there, defiantly shaking her head like she disagreed, rolling her eyes, kind of like a teenager who's bored in class. So madness, or just, the highest level of contempt? So, right, this brings us to the defense. Jocelyn's lawyer claimed, that none of this was her fault. That she supposedly suffered from episodes of psychosis, hallucinations, since she was young. But of course, nobody knew about it. Why? Because instead of seeking professional help, she supposedly relied on her faith, on prayer. Which, by the way, a very convenient position, right? Because it leaves no paper trail. No medical records. Then, after the events, of course, she told a psychiatrist exactly what you'd expect, I guess, a disturbed person to say. She claimed she felt like the devil entered her body, that she heard voices. A classic story. Voices telling her to harm people. The defense even gave a whole speech about it. Mental illness doesn't present like a bad cough or a limp. You don't see it right away. Sometimes it creeps up, it hides, before anyone notices. But in that, they're right, of course. Mental illness really is insidious. The only question, I guess, was whether this was mental illness. Because the prosecution, well, they totally disagreed with this whole devil theory. They argued her behavior that day, proved the exact opposite. It proved she was someone who knew very well what she was doing. They provided evidence. On that fatal day, she intentionally left her phone at home. But even more importantly, she hung several important personal documents. Probably insurance policies, papers for her son, right on the doorknob of her apartment. I mean, what? That if not getting her affairs in order? It doesn't look like a psychotic break, it looks like preparation. According to the prosecution, her plan that day was simple, also horrifying. But as we remember, that last part, well, it didn't work out, so then they call her son to the witness stand. I mean, it was just a circus of absurdity. He called the events an accident. The prosecutor, had to stop. I'm sorry, did you just say an accident? Like they fell off a bike. An accident. I mean, it's shocking. Plus, even though the entire defense was built on her being hunted by demons, her own son said he never once saw this devil side of her. Yeah, he admitted that on that morning, the day of the events, she looked sad plus depressed, but she just lost her apartment. She had no money. So, of course, she was depressed.
Yet, at the same time, she, like always, kissed him goodbye, waved as he left for school. No demons. Plus, one more weird detail about the phone. The son said that on the night of the events, when she was already in the hospital, but the phone should have been at home, he got a call from his mother's phone. He picked up, heard some unknown male voice say, "I need help," before hanging up. What was that? We know she left her phone at home, but it was never found. The line was disconnected shortly after the events. So who called? But where did the phone go? So now we get to the hardest part, the motive. A clear 100% motive, like an insurance policy or a love triangle. Well, it just wasn't there. The prosecutor argued that it was, most likely, this toxic combination of jealousy toward Marina, toward her seemingly perfect life, plus her own obvious financial problems. She couldn't afford her son's private school, she lost her apartment, she was forced to move back in with her sister. She was at rock bottom. So she looked at Marina, who had everything. But of course, this theory about jealousy plus money being behind it, while it remains just a theory. The prosecutor even honestly admitted this in his speech to the jury. You may feel you haven't heard a satisfactory answer to the question why. Because a satisfactory answer just doesn't exist. A brilliant move. How can you logically explain this kind of horror? But the hardest moment of the trial, that was the testimony from the father, Kevin Krim. His story it brought hardened jury members, reporters, I think even the judge, to tears. He described that moment at the airport when the police met him, plus that moment he arrived at the hospital, to say goodbye to his son plus his daughter, Lulu plus Leo.
With a look of disgust on his face, Kevin Krim sat on a courtroom bench just a few yards away from Yoselin Ortega, the woman he once trusted to care for his children. Her attorney says the 55-year-old suffers from severe psychosis and depression and heard voices telling her. But a video shown during the trial contradicts the defense claim, as Ortega is heard saying she never heard or saw Satan.
Do you remember at all talking to him about that you felt that you're being possessed by devil? The devil was taking control of your body?
No. Prosecutors claim Ortega acted out of anger against the Krims, particularly the children's mother, Marina Krim, for allegedly overworking her. Marina Krim was not in court today. The jurors are expected to begin deliberating tomorrow. In Lower Manhattan, Hazel Sanchez, CBS 2 News.
So this trial, it went on for 2 whole months. 2 long, just exhausting, emotional months. The public interest plus the media interest. It felt just colossal. This wasn't just another news story. No, this was no exaggeration. The loudest story in the country. The one everyone followed in real time. So finally, everyone just held their breath, just waited. The jury had heard absolutely everything. They heard the broken voice of Kevin Krim, saying goodbye to his children, in that condition. Plus, they listened to the weird, clumsy defense theories about the devil, about voices, plus that resentment over cleaning. So, yeah, after hearing all that, they went to deliberate. 2 days passed. 2 full days they spent behind closed doors, deciding the fate of Yoselin Ortega. Then they returned to the courtroom. They had a verdict.
In my best moments, I feel Lulu and Leo inspiring me and carrying me forward. In my most difficult moments, I try to ask myself what Lulu and Leo would choose to do. It's the best beacon of hope, the best guidance most of us could ever hope to have. Thank you.
Marina also spoke at the sentencing hearing.
2 full days they spent behind closed doors, deciding the fate of Yoselin Ortega. Then they returned to the courtroom. They had a verdict. All right, so the verdict. Yoselin Ortega was found guilty, but guilty on all counts. So what that means, it's one thing. The jury didn't believe a single word from the defense. Not the devil, not the sudden insanity, not the voices commanding her to do it. They saw this for what it was. Just a cold-blooded, planned act of revenge.
The victim's father, Kevin Krim, listened from the front row with alternate jurors who had already been dismissed but came back to hear the verdict.
Oh, yeah. The impact this case had on the jury, well, it went beyond just being obvious. You could, just see it plain as day. How could it be any different, right? After 2 months, just immersed in that kind of concentrated horror, after those photos, after the father's testimony, of course, it affected them.
We were divided at the beginning, and we were divided until the moment we made the decision.
I think I can speak on behalf of everybody. I say we feel great in the decision that we rendered.
This was a very difficult decision for all of us. While the basic facts were very clear from the beginning, we also wanted to be sure that we were giving everybody a fair opportunity. It was not a decision we reached lightly or easily. There were some raised voices and a lot of tears. But I think we all feel good that we addressed all of the issues and fairly weighed everything that was presented to us.
So the guilty verdict, it came down then right after that. Kevin Krim, the father, he wrote a post on Facebook. But this, it represented an incredibly human, powerful post, He wrote that he personally went up to the jurors, embraced as many members of that jury as he physically could. He didn't just say, thank you. He straight up said that these jurors, they went through hell, referring to the trial. But that wasn't an exaggeration, right? They went through hell. They saw things you can never unsee, those exact photographs. Then in that same post, Kevin added, this process, it's felt very difficult for us, but it also reaffirmed our love for New York City. That's a pretty amazing statement if you think about it. The city where his children were lost, but he didn't grow to hate it. Why? Because you see, it remained the city that Lulu plus Leo loved so much. But now the verdict existed. So it became time to hear the final punishment. Yeah, time for Yoselin Ortega's sentencing.
Now is the time for justice. Justice for Lulu, justice for Leo, justice for Marina, Kevin, and Nessie, justice for the people of the state of New York, justice for all of the people who are part of the Krim's life, who love the Krim family and love their children. And it's time for justice. Nobody saw signs of a serious mental illness because there was no serious mental illness. That's what the jury found in rejecting her defense. And that's the way that she should be sentenced.
So the day of the sentencing hearing arrived. The day the parents could finally address the court, plus address her. Kevin Krim, the father, he got the floor. But he wasn't trying to be diplomatic. He didn't hold back that rage that had been building for years. He looked at Yoselin, calling her the exact words she deserved. Evil. An extremely dangerous narcissist. Plus, what probably hit the hardest, Given her financial issues, a complete failure. I mean, these weren't just emotions. This represented a cold statement of fact after 2 months of trial, where she, laughed, rolled her eyes. Then he turned directly to the judge. Plus his words, well, they weren't a request. They were a demand for justice. He said, "I hope you don't need this request from Lulu's plus Leo's father after everything you've heard, everything you've seen, after all those photos, all the testimony. But I'm gonna make it anyway. He left the judge zero room for interpretation. In your sentencing decision, please follow the law as you always have, ensuring the defendant can never leave prison alive. Just black plus white, life without parole, ever." But he finished his speech with the strongest, coldest blow. The defendant knows nothing about responsibility or remorse. Which, honestly, that's true. We saw her behavior, so she should also know nothing about hope. Like an eye for an eye, hope for hope. She took everything from them. She doesn't deserve even, I guess, a theoretical glimmer of light at the end of her own worthless tunnel.
And more important, in my best moments, I feel Lulu and Leo inspiring me and carrying me forward. In my most difficult moments, I try to ask myself what Lulu and Leo would choose to do. It's the best beacon of hope, the best guidance most of us could ever hope to have. Thank you.
But, of course, after the father, well, the mother spoke too. Marina also spoke at the sentencing hearing. So if Kevin's speech, felt full of that cold, concentrated rage, well, you can only guess, right? What the woman who first opened that door, the one who first saw everything, what she had to say, I mean, this represented her.
So it was her turn to speak, and, well, of course, she used a translator. Using a translator, right? Speaking her native Spanish because, obviously she suddenly forgot all her English after living so many years in New York City, plus working for an English-speaking family. Yoselin, well, she finally addressed the court.
I ask for a great deal of forgiveness. God, Marina to Marina.
So look, her lawyer, the person whose job it was to defend the indefensible, he stood up asking the judge for, leniency. Yeah, for leniency. Plus, for her to be taken into custody, but with access to mental health professionals, to doctors, not just thrown in a cell. He was asking to give her a chance, to someday get out, to give her that exact hope that Kevin Krim, well, he so clearly asked for her not to have. But the judge didn't agree. Of course he didn't agree. Judge Gregory Caro, who, listened to all this hell for 2 months, he responded. Plus, he called this woman's act not an illness, not a tragedy, but pure evil, period. So he separately praised the jurors. He thanked them for basically having the strength, the intelligence to reject that ridiculous, just false argument for insanity. Then he addressed her directly. Your planning plus forethought regarding, what you planned for yourself that day. It appeared, without a doubt, flawless. The judge clearly said you thought everything through perfectly when it came to you. You left the documents, you prepared, you knew what you were doing. But it remains unclear, he continued. Plus, it remains unclear mainly because you claim you suddenly have a lack of memory. He basically called it a lie. You remember everything convenient for you, but you forgot the most important part.
Moments ago, the sentence came down, and Yoselin Ortega will spend the rest of her life behind bars.
Judge Caro, in the end, he fulfilled that exact request from the father, from Kevin Krim. That demand for justice that echoed in the courtroom? Yoselin Ortega was sentenced to life in prison, without any, absolutely zero chance of parole. She will never know what hope feels like. Just like she took it away from the Krims.
Parents are channeling their pain into a new initiative named for their children, advocating for legislation that makes falsifying references on job applications for caregivers a crime.
Thank you to everyone who watched this story all the way to the end. Just know we love you guys like family. Write in the comments what you think. Would you ever trust your child with a nanny? Oh, plus be careful out there. Don't harm anyone.